The 613th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
Oh, they're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play. Stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh Nathan here with you guys on a Sunday night here to get you ready for Carolina and Navy, which will come your way Tuesday, 7 p.m. in the Smith Center. The final game of the 5-game homestand open up the season before Carolina will have a week off before they travel to Florida to compete in their annual Thanksgiving Day event. And we're here to preview that game, which I believe we will be both in attendance for as members of the media. We're coming off a wild day in the National Football League, and we wanted to come on here before the Sunday night game to get you ready for the next time we see Carolina play basketball. So we'll tell you everything you need to know about Navy, look at this game from the Carolina perspective, have a discussion topic around Kyan Evans that I want to have, give our keys to the game and make our game predictions. But before we do that, we start every edition of the pod, as we always do, with the pod thought of the day. We go to Vince Lombardi for that pod thought. That thought is, quote, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase perfection, we can catch excellence, end quote. You know, one of the mantras you hear Carolina basketball use, mainly under Hubert Davis, is we want to go from good to great, whether it's our shot selection, defense, overall level of play, so on and so forth. We want to be a good program that becomes a great program. And that's historically what we've seen with all the trips to the Final Four, championships won, so on and so forth. And I think this is a really great quote because, you know, we live in a day and time where teams are no longer going to go undefeated in college basketball. We haven't had an undefeated champ since 1976. We haven't had an undefeated team enter the NCAA tournament since the bubble tournament a few years ago. There's just so much parity right now that it's hard to ask a team to go undefeated. So we cannot ask you to chase perfection, but we can ask you to chase excellence. And I think that's what the non-conference season is really about, because this is where you set the tone. This is where you set the foundation for what kind of team you're going to be. This is where you set your habits. This is where the things that set in November and December will be the traits that carry over into January, February, and most importantly, the month of March. And I think while we've got a ways to go, we're only 4 games in, and there's so much room to growth, or there's so much room for growth. You can see little bits and pieces here with the way this team is wired, with the way this team competes, that excellence is attainable if they keep the mindset they've had the first 4 games up throughout the next handful of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, especially on the defensive end of the floor. I think that's the one area where we feel like this team is really doing a great job, is what they're doing defensively, the effort that they're bringing, and how they've competed in that area just in the first 4 games of the season, where, you look at the win over NC Central. Yeah, Carolina, put up over 100 points, blow them out the same way that, let's say, NC State did? No. But Carolina was better defensively in that game than NC State was in their first matchup of the season when they met NC Central. So, I mean, I think that shows you that Carolina is doing certain things that they need to do the right way. They're putting the ball back in the post the way that they were able to a few years ago when Armando Bacot was here. And I really think that, they found the strengths of this team already. And that's the good thing, is that, last year it felt like it took forever to find what this team was good at, what areas they were going to be successful in, and to be able to feed off of that. But this year, it doesn't seem like that's necessarily the case. It feels like Carolina has found that here early on in the season. They know that they are playing through their 2 post players who are having tremendous starts to the season, and it's leading to a ton of success. And I think that's something you're going to see once again in this game against Navy.
All right, let's set the scene for the game on Tuesday night against the Naval Academy, which Carolina, ironically enough, they have a losing record against Navy. They're just 1-3 all time. I was trying to do as much research as I can. That's according to Sports Reference College Basketball. And they have head-to-head matchups that all the way back to 1949, 1950. I don't know if there were some more matchups prior, but before that time frame, we'll find out whenever the Carolina basketball account does tweet out, whenever they put out the notes for the game. But regardless, Carolina since 1949, 1950, they've lost 3 of the 4 games against the midshipmen. You look at this year's version of Navy. They bring with them a record of 2-2 with wins at Presbyterian, 76-55, and a win against Washington College, 97-64. Their losses have come to Yale, 97-68, and they competed on the road at Penn State. They lost that game 80-71. Something you've referenced, whenever we've talked about them from a non-conference perspective. This team was picked to win the Patriot League under first-year head coach John Perry. Of course, the Patriot League, a one-bid league for the NCAA tournament, but of all the mid-major schools that Carolina has played so far, this was the one that has the highest expectation. They are expected to make the 2026 NCAA tournament. They do have 4 players currently averaging double-figure scoring, led by Jinwoo Kims at 15.5 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, 1.5 assists. He's shooting 49% from the field, 39% from 3. Donovan Draper is their second leading scorer, 12.8 points, 8.3 rebounds, 3.8 assists. He is shooting 53% from the field, 18% from 3. Aiden Kehoe is their third leading scorer, 12.3 points, 6.5 rebounds, 1 assist. He is shooting 73% from the field. And then Austin Badinji is their fourth leading scorer, 12 points per game, 1.5 rebounds, 5 assists. He is shooting just 36% from the field, but 50% from behind the three-point line. You look at where they stand in KenPom. As of Sunday night, they're 172nd overall. Their adjusted offensive efficiency is 105.2. That's 196 in the country. And their adjusted defensive efficiency is 107.5. That's good for 174th in all of college basketball. But we'll kind of just reference or reiterate it once again. This is a mid-major program from a one big league that is expected to win their conference. They are expected to be the team that emerges out of the Patriot League. And that's pretty substantial because in the last handful of years, that's been a league that's been ran by Colgate. I think they've made the tournament 3 of the last 4 years, but now it looks like from the pundits' perspective, it's Navy's turn to do so. They've got 4 players averaging double figures, 4 players averaging 12 points or more per game. And so, of all the mid-majors that Carolina has played so far, this will be their 4th and 5th in their first 5 games. This one on paper is the one that stands to be the most competitive team we've seen visit the Smith Center here in November.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that this group looks like it's going to be one of the best that Carolina is going to see in the non-conference. And, they're not off to necessarily the best start. I mean, that loss to Yale, really getting smashed by that team, certainly not something that I think they were expecting in that matchup. But they almost found a way to beat Penn State. That's something that shouldn't really shock you, even though Penn State is a power conference program. They're not necessarily great, especially since Micah Shrewsbury is no longer there. And so it makes sense that Navy's coming in here probably a little irritated with where they're at to start the year. They feel like they're a team that can win this conference in a year where, it looks like Colgate might be down a little bit. So maybe they're the team that can take advantage. You mentioned the fact that you've got not only 4 guys that are scoring in double figures, 4 guys that are scoring over 12 points per game. So they do have a lot of different options that I think, some of these other teams that Carolina has faced haven't necessarily had. The NC Central team that you faced the other night, they had Gage Lattimore, who came into the game that was playing well, and Corey Harvey, who was averaging double-figure scoring as well. Outside of that, everybody else was really struggling to start the year. So for this group, it's going to be a much different test, a team that can score the ball so far early on in the season, and we'll see if that translates over into this game. It's also a team that's rebounding the ball pretty well. That's certainly something that, Carolina hasn't yet faced this year outside of the game against Kansas. It's a team that is rebounding the ball well. And overall, you just look at their shooting numbers. For the most part, those are pretty solid shooting numbers. So I think Carolina is going to be tested in this game, no doubt. This is what you were hoping, though, when you scheduled this type of schedule, was that you could find 1 or 2 of those mid-major teams that ended up giving you some sort of test on top of the ones that you were going to get from Kansas, Michigan State, and Kentucky, along with Georgetown now looking like they're going to give you a challenge, and maybe Ohio State. So I think this is something that definitely helps Carolina going up in against an opponent like this. But they certainly have to be prepared and ready for this one. This is not one that you can just say is another mid-major opponent that's walking in here, like you could say the other night when you were facing off against NC Central.
Yeah, let's look at the game from Carolina's perspective. The Heels are 4-0 on the season, as you well know. And as of recording, they are ranked 18th in the AP poll. But I do think they will be higher than that when we take the court on Tuesday night. All 4 wins have come at home, and Carolina is averaging 91.8 points per game. But to kind of show you just how early season scoring is right now in college basketball, that number is just 50th best in all of the sport. The Heels have 3 active players averaging double-figure scoring. Caleb Wilson leads the way at 20 points per game, 9.5 rebounds, 3 assists. He's shooting 67% from the field, 50% from 3. Henry Vassar is their second leading scorer, 16.8 points, 8 rebounds, or 16 points per game and 8 rebounds per game, 1.8 assists. He's shooting 70% from the field, 43% from 3. And then Luka Bogovac is the last guy to average double-digit scoring, 11.8 points, 2.8 rebounds, 3.3 assists. He's shooting 40% from the field, 29% from 3. And there's a drastic difference in Carolina's KenPom rankings compared to those of Navy's. Carolina is 23rd overall in KenPom. Their adjusted offensive efficiency of 118.8 ranks 22nd best in college basketball. And their adjusted defensive efficiency of 97.6 ranks 28th in all of college basketball. Before we get to our discussion topics, just really quickly, When you look at the numbers that Wilson and Bissar are combining to average, you're talking about those two players combining to average 36 points, 17 rebounds, and nearly 5 assists, and then their efficiency totals. They're both shooting north of 67% from the field overall. But they're both shooting over 43% from behind the three-point line. I mean, I think, we had high expectations for especially Caleb Wilson, top 10 freshman. Henry Vassar was Carolina's most coveted transfer that they brought in. And there was a lot of hype around the front court, but I think it's fair to say that they're exceeding expectations here early on, because I didn't know they would combine to average these types of numbers, let alone be this efficient on a night in, night out basis where they're scoring their points and going 9 of 12, 9 of 13 from the field. And that includes them stepping out and shooting a handful of threes in every game as well.
Yeah, I think for this group, when it comes to Caleb Wilson, I think we expected that he would be good out of the gate. I don't think we expected that he would be this good out of the gate. I mean, we're talking about a guy that really is one of the best players in the entire country right now, early on in the season. I mean, what he's doing so far, he scored 20 points in every game but one. And that game was the only reason why he didn't score 20 points was because he got in foul trouble. What did he do to make up for it? Oh, that's right. He had 13 and 14 in the game. So he certainly is a guy that I think is playing at a level that we didn't necessarily think. I thought early in the season, if this dude was averaging 15 points per game, you would take it. You're off to a really good start as a true freshman, and then you kind of just build from there. Meaning the fact that he's already where he's at and he's going to continue to build, that really shows you that Carolina could have something special here in Caleb Wilson, one of the guys that could put up, one of the higher point per game totals in the league. And of course, average, the average rebounds, 9.5. I mean, if he's in that area this year, that is such a far cry from last season where most of the year your leading rebounder was a guard in Seth Trimble. I mean, that's just amazing to think how in just 1 year you have gotten so far away from that. And yeah, his efficiency numbers are crazy. I mean, for a guy that, takes the type of mid-range jump shots that he takes at times, for him to be knocking down 67% of his shots. And a lot of that is because he does a really good job of attacking the rim and finishing with dunks. But, the other part is he seems to make all those mid-range jump shots. I mean, you look at the other night, we didn't even talk about this aspect of his performance. I mean, he was 7 of 8 the other night. And yeah, in the first game of the season, he was incredibly efficient as well. That was because he was literally dunking everything. In this game, I think he had, one dunk that I remember. So, this is a guy that's doing all of this while not necessarily having to finish with dunks in order to have that high of an efficiency and shooting 50% from three. I mean, it doesn't take a ton of them, but when he does, he's able to knock them down. And then Vassar, I think that is definitely a little bit of a shock with where he's at, because again, he's coming over from being in a situation at Arizona where he played 20 minutes a game. And now he has become basically what Carolina bigs have been in the past, where he's playing a ton of minutes and he is, converting on the offensive end when he gets the chance. 16 points per game so far this year. I think that is more than any of us could have imagined for him. I mean, he was a guy that we probably thought would be somewhere in that 12, 13 point range. For him to be at 16 right now. And, things could even out as the season goes along, but with where they sit right now, which includes a game against Kansas mixed in there where he played very well, I think this shows you that he has more of a scoring prowess than maybe we knew that he was going to have. He's efficient in both areas. I like the efficiency from three. That's something that you were hoping was going to be brought over with him from his time at Arizona. Again, not a guy that's taken a ton of shots from the outside. You don't need him to, but certainly a guy that has that ability to stretch the floor, which is part of why Carolina brought him over. And rebounding wise, he's been good. And that's a good thing considering the fact that there were some concerns. And I was one of the people that was a little bit concerned about this based off of his time at Arizona and what was said by Chris Spatola after the first, during the first game of the season, where you were worried about his frame and would he be able to hold up rebounding wise against some of the more physical teams. Well, he went up against Kansas. He was successful, and he's been successful in every game since. So I feel pretty good about where he's at as well. And this front court carrying this team right now, as many around the country expected when they watched this team in preseason practice. And I expect that to probably be the case for most of the season.
Let's get now to the discussion topic that I wanted to have for this game, because there's still just a lot of conversation around Kyan Evans. And I do think like most of it is in a positive manner. Like I came out of the North Carolina Central game fine or pleased with the way that he played, but I did want more. Like I came away from wanting more from him just because I thought there was a lot more scoring opportunities there for him that he chose to not seek out because he's in such a pass-first mindset right now. He's not a double-digit leading, or he's not a double-digit scorer right now for Carolina. But this is what his stat line reads after 4 games. He's averaging 9.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, 5 assists against 1.8 turnovers, while shooting 52% from the field, 41% from 3, and playing roughly 27 minutes per contest. When you look at that stat line, and you know that, after the Navy game, the competition does step up. You'll see a pretty decent middle-of-the-road team from St. Bonaventure out of the A-10. You'll see Michigan State. You still got to go to Kentucky, and you got an Ohio State game as well in Atlanta before Christmas, before non-conference play does conclude. Is Kyan Evans' level of play right now, will it still translate into wins for Carolina? Do you believe when the non-conference competition gets tougher and we get into full-blown ACC play, or do you maybe see where I'm coming from, where that level of play is fine and he's not playing bad, but for this team to achieve excellence that we talked about the pod thought of the day, to maybe really compete with the Louisvilles and the Dukes of the world for an ACC regular season title, there is another level of offensive output he's gonna have to give this Carolina team.
Yeah, I mean, I think right now what we've seen from him is probably fine. And you look back at the start of the season. I mean, you go back to the game against Kansas, and he was really good in that game. Started scoring the ball in that second half, had 12 points in the game total. I mean, that's certainly a solid number. I mean, you go back to the opener too against Central Arkansas, and he scores 15 in that game, where Carolina needed more of that from him because there wasn't really anybody else that was stepping up offensively at certain times during that game. So he put it on his back and said, I'm going to go out there and score for Carolina the way that I need to and the way that I'm capable of doing from my time at Colorado State. Now, eventually Henry Vasar, starts scoring the ball in that game. Same thing with Seth Trimble in that Central Arkansas game. But I do think that when you've needed him to step up scoring-wise, you have seen that from him. I think he's done the things that you need him to do. I mean, in terms of sharing the basketball, I think he's been fantastic. I think that that's been the area of his game that maybe has improved the most from his time at Colorado State. And it wasn't like he was bad in that area, but he was seeking his offense more down the stretch last year. Now, he was in a much different situation. It was Neek Clifford and then him. That was it on that Colorado State team, where this year he's a guy that when you look at it, we just talked about the impact of Caleb Wilson, who, by the way, as somebody pointed out on YouTube, he had 3 dunks in that last game. I don't know what I was talking about there. It didn't feel like he had 3 dunks in that last game. Maybe that's because, when you have 7 in the first game of the season, it's hard to live up to that expectation the rest of the year. But, you see what you got from Caleb Wilson. You see what you got from Henry Vasar. And then, you've gotten some scoring from Luka Bogovac in these last couple of games. I don't think Kyan Evans has needed to seek his offense, but I'm confident that when he needs to seek it, when he realizes that, hey, this is an off night for some of the other guys on this team, I need to step up and be that scoring threat that I was when I was at Colorado State and what they needed me to be when they brought me in here. I feel confident that he's going to be able to do it. But I love the way that he's playing right now. I love the fact that he is sharing the ball as well as he is without turning the basketball over, something that we stressed that Carolina had to be able to do this year. And you can go back and most people thought, because of what they've been accustomed to the last few years, there were people on social media that were saying after the first half, Kyan Evans is just turning it over at too high of a rate. I mean, he turned it over one time in the game the other night for Carolina against NC Central. So if he's going to be able to continue to do what he did the other night, where he had 7 assists to just 1 turnover, you're going to live with that, especially if you're seeing the type of performances that you're seeing scoring-wise from everybody else out there. So I wouldn't be concerned just yet.
I think the most important thing to remember and to really understand, he's running the team in a much better manner than what Elliot Cadeau did. And that's the most important, because he's distributing the ball for his teammates while getting the ball where they want the ball and not committing turnovers, not committing, he dealt with foul trouble against Kansas, but that's going to happen. You're going to get in a game where you got a tight whistle. How do you respond to that? I think that's been the most impressive thing, is he hasn't yet played a complete game, but whenever he's been challenged at halftime, he's responded. And that's a good thing, because when the same thing happened with Elliot Cadeau, that didn't happen. When Cadeau played bad, it permeated through the rest of the game, and it impacted the rest of Carolina's roster, because he wouldn't play smart, he wouldn't play hard, would commit bad turnovers, which would lead to fouls, so on and so forth. I think what you like about Kyan Evans is there's a mental toughness that you need to have to play here with all the criticism that's going to come your way, and then there's just the physical toughness as well to be able to go out there and make plays. And so I think if he's being honest with himself, if Hubert Davis is being honest with us, they would probably admit they know there's another level offensively he's got to get to. Like he's a much better scorer than what we've seen so far this season. But with a roster that's still trying to figure out how to play with one another with 11 newcomers, it's really beneficial that he's as unselfish as he is, because he's setting up all the other guys, and he does have a good feel for the game for when to attack. And so I think it's been a lot of fun kind of watching him learn on the job. Obviously, I'm going to be the first guy to come to his defense, because I loved him in the portal and I hyped him up all summer long. But I do think he's giving Carolina a more adequate play than what he's been given credit for. And he's simply doing what we asked Elliot Cadeau to do, which was pick your spots when to score, get your teammates involved, don't turn it over, and play good defense. And he's doing that through the first 4 games. Expect that to continue Tuesday night against Navy. Let's go ahead and give our keys to the game before we make our predictions. The first key I wrote down was dominate the glass. Carolina's averaging 47.5 rebounds per contest through the first 4 games, and Navy enters the game averaging just 34 rebounds. So on paper, Carolina is plus 13.5 in that category. And this is where Carolina's size and their length has really shown up, because they have just overwhelmed opponents on the glass all season long here in the early going. Their rebounding is what kept them in the game against Kansas when they had a poor first half showing against the Jayhawks. And the other, it's because they've done a pretty good job on the defensive glass, holding opponents to 1 possession and then grabbing offensive rebounds and getting second chance points. And so, this is going to be by far the biggest team that Navy has seen so far, the most athletic team Navy has seen so far. And I hope Carolina exploits that, because when you see a plus 13.5 rebounding advantage on the stat sheet, I think that's something you should expect to carry over onto the quarter competition.
Yeah, Carolina's been dominating on the glass so far early in the season, and this is a team that they've got a couple of guys that are rebounding well in Donovan Draper and Aiden Kehoe, but I definitely think that going into this game, Carolina should feel confident that they should be able to out-rebound them. Now, the interesting thing about Navy is that while they aren't necessarily rebounding at a high rate, opponent rebounding against them has not been great. I mean, they are the 31st in total rebounds allowed to opponents, and just 20, and they're 28th in defensive rebounds allowed. So they're still out rebounding people, even though there aren't a lot of rebounds out there to be had in the games that they've played. They're still finding ways to out rebound people. So that's what they're going to try to do, limit the amount of rebounds that are available for Carolina. So Carolina's got to take advantage of that, in this game and dominate the glass in order to get some of those second chance opportunities and stop Navy, more importantly, from getting those second chance opportunities on their end, something that, as we've seen before, can lead to upsets in college basketball when you allow teams to get those second chance opportunities, whether it's turnovers or offensive rebounding. So Carolina's got to take care of that in this game.
The second key I wrote down for this game was to continue to defend at a high level. As we mentioned, from the games against mid-major competition, this is the most explosive offense Carolina has seen in terms of just how many points per game Navy averages. And then you factor in the fact that they got 4 guys that are averaging over 12 points per game. But you look at Carolina's defensive numbers so far. They're allowing teams to shoot just 33% from the field. That's 8th best in the country. They're allowing just 13 made 2-point field goals. That's 10th best in the country. And teams are shooting just 35% from 2-point land. That is 6th best in the country. And that game, or those stats include a game against Kansas. A nationally ranked Kansas team, and a Kansas team that's going to play, I think they'll play meaningful games in the Big 12 deep into February on into early March. And so this is something that, like, the more Carolina does this, the more it's easier to buy in and believe this is what's going to show up every single night, is that they're going to compete defensively, and they're going to do so without fouling. That was a big learning curve from the Radford game. They defended against Radford at a high level, yes, but they also committed way too many fouls that you just can't commit against better competition. So this will be a different challenge just because of they've got 4 double-digit scores on their roster. So you can't just take away one guy like you could against North Carolina Central and Gage Lattimore. You've got to be aware they got 4 guys that can put the ball in the basket. But if this is going to be a team that's going to chase excellence, doing so, it starts on the defensive end of the floor, and I'd like to see that same defensive energy and intensity on Tuesday night.
Yeah, that's where you need it across the board for Carolina. And it's not that it hasn't been across the board, but especially in this game, when you've got 4 guys that are scoring 12 points or more, you need Carolina to be out there defending at a high level and making things difficult for Navy. I mean, you look at Navy so far this season. I mean, in terms of field goal efficiency, I mean, they are 48th in the country. So they have been very efficient shooting the basketball. They've been most efficient really from beyond the arc, where they're 115th. Although they don't take a lot of shots from out there, they are pretty efficient. So Carolina's got to be ready. This is going to be a Navy team that's going to want to score the ball inside. 38 2-point attempts per game. So that's something that Carolina has to make sure that they're ready for. This is going to be a team that's going to challenge them on the interior. This is where, if you are Carolina, the strength of your team is on the interior. And we've seen defensively the way that they've been able to protect the rim, both Henry Visar and what we've seen from Caleb Wilson. I mean, you would expect that you're going to see that again in this game. Just take away those easy looks on the inside. Make this team have to make some threes from the outside, because they are 355th in the country in 3-point attempts so far this year. They take just 16 per game. So they are a team that wants to try to get the ball inside, try to bully you down low. Carolina's got to be able to take that away. I think so far what we've seen this year, Carolina's done a really good job. Most of their guys really solid, even in situations where they do get caught in switches. They've been really good at defending the dribble drive, preventing that, where in years past, that was something that really bothered Carolina. They would allow a lot of points off the dribble, and you've seen Carolina has done a really good job this year of stopping the ball on the perimeter and making teams have to take shots from the outside. This is a team that doesn't necessarily thrive in that area, so that needs to be the goal once again for Carolina in this game on the defensive end of the floor.
Last key to the game I wrote down was I want to challenge Navy's depth. They have 8 guys that play 11 minutes a game, but how much can those guys handle playing against Carolina's, size, length, and athleticism? Now, they held their own against a power conference opponent in Penn State, but I don't think Penn State and Carolina are on the same level in terms of basketball prowess. But with where that program is under Mike Rhodes and where Carolina has it right now under Hubert Davis. And this really just comes down to being aggressive and getting them in foul trouble. Something that, again, Carolina's done a really good job here in the early season where they are averaging 30.8 free throws per game. That's 27th most in all of college basketball. Now, they're only making 21 and a half of those, which is 40th, but, that's a lot of points at the foul line that are there to be had. And that means that you're getting the best team's players in foul trouble on a consistent basis, which is kind of a calling card back to what Carolina did such a good job under Dean Smith when he was Carolina's head coach, and something I think Hubert Davis has really tried to exploit during his tenure as Carolina's head coach. So, and when you see, the guys on their bench that average double-digit minutes, you do see a drop-off in production where you see all those guys that average double-figure scoring. That's not the same case for the guys that are coming off the bench. They're productive players, but they're not doing, maybe what some other bench players around the country are capable of doing. So I love to see Carolina be aggressive. I only got to worry about that with Caleb Wilson and Henry Vassar because they both guys play with an edge. It comes down to really your guards and is Kyan Evans and particularly Luka Bogovac. Are they going to put the ball on the floor? Are they going to put pressure on the rim? Are they going to drive the cup? Because they should be able to do so whenever they want to. Same thing with some of Carolina's reserves. I think Jonathan Powell is a great driver. He has to become a better finisher, but puts a lot of pressure on the defense. Derek Dixon, so on and so forth. So, Davie is a team that, there aren't many mid-major teams that have guys that play as many minutes per game off the bench as they do. So you do have to give Davie some credit for that. But I'd also like to challenge their depth because that depth hasn't seen the level of skill like they'll see on Tuesday night against Carolina.
Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal. And, yeah, getting this team into foul trouble, it's not overly difficult, but it's not the easiest team in the country to get into foul trouble. They're averaging 17 and a half personal fouls per game, which is 143rd in the country. So middle of the road. So this is something that is achievable for Carolina if you really put your mind to it. I think, you've got to have the guys that are attacking inside normally attack the paint as well. That's where you want to see Jaren Stevenson continue to do what he's doing. But you also want to see the guys that haven't necessarily attacked the paint not all that well, but they've been successful when they've done it. But it hasn't necessarily been as often as maybe people would like. This is where, when you talk about Kyan Evans being more aggressive on the offensive end, being more aggressive scoring-wise, that's where you want to see that is by him getting downhill and getting to the basket. This is a game where having Seth Trimble would be really helpful for Carolina because having him there to attack that depth, or attack the rim and get into that depth on the bench, I think would be very advantageous for Carolina. So I think this is one of those games where you'll probably feel the effects of not having him out there, but that's where you need, guys like Kyan Evans and Luka Bogovac to step up, put a little bit more pressure on the rim, and get this team into a little bit of foul trouble. Because as you said, when you get into the bench, the first 5 guys are relatively productive, but then there's a significant drop-off when you get to the bench in terms of offensive production on the floor. And look, there are guys, that will, you're not going to have a full hockey line change out there where you're not going to have any of those starters on the floor, but put some pressure on some of these guys to step up individually as well and have to really have big nights. Because, they've got some guys that are scoring the ball well, but their scoring is really spread out. There's not a guy that can necessarily take over the game, it doesn't look like. So if you're Carolina, put them into those situations, force them to have to try to take over the game. I think that's certainly a recipe for success for the Tar Heels in this one.
Carolina enters the game with a 95.8% chance to win. That, of course, according to ESPN's analytics. I'll let you go first. Who wins the game and why?
Yeah, I think Carolina wins the game, and I think they'll win it relatively comfortably. I know this is a Navy team that was expected to be really good coming into the year, but there's some areas that are attackable with them. I mean, if Carolina can take care of defending in the paint, which it feels like Carolina has done a really good job of most of the year, the stats would back that up as well. Well, then, you're going to force this team to have to take shots from the outside, which is not their strength at all. I think that's got to be the main plan for Carolina on the defensive end of the floor. I think you're going to have some strong performances there from that group once again, because I love the energy every time out for Carolina on that end of the floor. And then offensively, I think you're going to continue to see Caleb Wilson is going to continue to dominate as long as he doesn't get into foul trouble. Same thing with Henry Visar. It just doesn't feel like they necessarily have the size to be able to deal with what Carolina is going to throw their way. And so, I think Carolina will be in good shape in this one. They've got to take care of the basketball, get off to a little bit of a faster start here by taking care of that basketball and allow yourself to build a lead early as opposed to having to pull away in the second half. If you can do that and show that you're capable of hanging on to the basketball, I think that will prove to be a recipe for success for Carolina as they go further into the season. But, this Navy team, definitely a team that, Carolina could, end up seeing in the NCAA tournament later on this year. You would hope that Carolina would be somewhere in that range to be able to take on a team out of the Patriot League. So it'll be a nice test for Carolina, but I do think that they will find a way to win and win this one relatively comfortably.
Yeah, first half turnovers will probably be the thing we're watching the most on Monday or on Tuesday after Carolina turned it over 10 times on Friday night, came back with 0 turnovers in the second half. At some point, they got to quit turning it over as much in the first half as they have here in the first handful of games. I think Carolina wins until I see a front court that I think can handle Carolina's duo of Wilson and Visar. I'm not picking against Carolina. I think it's as good a front court as there is right now in college basketball. And Carolina's getting enough perimeter shooting to kind of supplement what they're doing on the inside, kind of playing, old school Carolina basketball with a bunch of high-low action between your fours and your fives. I think Carolina wins. I think you continue to see Luka Bogovac get comfortable playing in that 2-guard spot as Seth Trimble continues to rehab from injury. Jaron Stevenson has been a steady force at the 3 for Carolina. Hopefully we can see how Zayden High and James Brown can build off some extended minutes from the previous game, because I think, Hubert Davis would like to have a secondary backup 5 option behind Visar outside of Jaron Stevenson. But, that's going to be determined as this non-con season moves along. That being said, I think Carolina gets a win against Navy, which is rare. As we mentioned, Carolina does have a losing record against the Navy midshipmen, but I think that record will improve on Tuesday. I think Carolina wins, and I think they conclude their longest season opening homestand since 1918-1919 with their 5th straight win at the Smith Center. With that, folks, is going to wrap up this edition of the show. In the meantime, we will direct you guys to the website, that's HeelToughBlog.com, where we had you covered this weekend with all the action with Carolina football and basketball. Football lost a tough one at Wake Forest. That game has been recapped for you guys. Go and check out that. Anthony has you covered with all his thoughts and takeaways from the tough loss in Winston-Salem. I had you covered with the North Carolina Central game. If you want to go check out any of that content, you can. I'll be getting you ready for the game on Tuesday against Navy. Preview will go up day of. Recap will go up more than likely on Wednesday morning, while Anthony turns his attention to Duke. The battle for the victory bell returns to Chapel Hill. We'll keep you up to date on all things with that matchup on our website. As for the podcast, you know where to find us. Every major podcasting platform. Simply search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to rate, review, and subscribe. That way you don't miss any editions of the show. If you're a video consumer, the best way to keep up with us, like and follow the Facebook page at Heel Tough Blog. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog. We've surpassed 5,000 subscribers. Next milestone is to get to 600. And then you can like and follow me on Twitter at HTB_Josh. If you do any of those three things, the second we go live, you'll be notified and you can jump in and be a part of our conversation around the Tar Heels. But with that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.